Robert, thanks very much for the introduction. And Arti, thanks for asking me to be here. Very similar to Arti, I was actually a regular customer of Spring Valley for many years. Spring Valley is Kenya's oldest artisanal premium coffee roaster. And I bought the business 3.5 years ago. And my wife laughed at me. She said, you're like a drug dealer. You actually bought your own supply. And that's exactly what I did. But we did it because we wanted to showcase the best of what Kenya has to offer. As we know, as everyone knows, coffee is largely a commoditized product, and most of it travels the world in green or unprocessed formats. And it's really, really important that we're adding value in country of origin. So we're Kenya's oldest artisanal premium roaster. We have 4 different lines of business. One is we own and operate our own cafes. We believe people on the continent need to experience high quality coffee before purchasing it. The second part is we supply coffee to leading hotels and restaurants and cafes across the region. And then the third is a small but growing export business. So we supply roasted coffee to customers all over the world, either direct to consumer or to other businesses around the world. And our core premise is actually quite simple. We add value to every bean that we touch. So we're not commodity traders. There are people that do that incredibly well. We are not one of them. And we're just really passionate about coffee. We don't do anything else. All we do is coffee. First, Kenya's got fantastic traceability going all the way back in the history of our coffee value chain. So that traceability has been there almost since the existence of the industry. And what we're doing is we're kind of applying a digital layer above that. So for example, we're currently testing one of our coffees to have full traceability from the farm to the washing station down to the mill, but through a QR code, you'll understand kind of where that coffee was at what point in the process, which hands it touched, and right down to the end consumer. And once you scan that QR code, you'll have an option to actually add a tip to the farmer or add a tip to the roaster. But what's really interesting about this is we've had to work with a partner called Gravity Earth, a technology partner, who've been fantastic. And we have helped put in kind of very basic smartphones at various levels in the value chain. So you think about the farm, you think about the cooperative where the coffee is collected, the washing station if it's at the cooperative, the dry mill when it goes from the dry mill to their marketing agent and their storage facility, and then eventually when it comes out to someone like us. So we actually have full traceability on that. So that's something that we're doing kind of in the domestic space. On the export space, to be honest, because that's with one coffee, we're running a trial. It's quite expensive, and the biggest challenge here has been for some of the smaller players in the space. We're willing to invest in the technology of some of our larger farm partners, but for the smaller ones, it doesn't make sense for them. So the bottleneck is really that we're going to run the pilot with this one particular farm, see how that works, and if that does work, we'll roll that out to our 6 other kind of farmer and cooperative partners over the course of the next couple of years.
So what do you think? So I hear you. Cost is one issue. It sounds like also the availability of devices and connectivity at different points in the chain. What are some of the other challenge? Because it sounds great, and it sounds like we should have always been doing this. Why haven't we? And what are the challenges that collectively we need to overcome?
Well, the truth is in Kenya, and I can only speak for Kenya, we've had it. It's just been in a non-digital form. All this information is actually collected. So when I have a big sack of 60 kilos of coffee, from the numbers, the out-trim number, I know which week that coffee was processed, where it came from, what mill it went through. So Kenya is fantastic. Applying a digital layer to that in Kenya is actually easy because we already have the information. It's already held on record in a non-digital format. The other big challenge, bizarrely, is we talk about smartphones, but there's actually electricity. Kenya is now 80% electrified, but electricity in some of these places, if you can't charge your smartphone, then how are you actually going to be able to scan what you need to scan or document that? The other challenge that we actually face is actually trust. Even with the digital infrastructure is actually the trust. Where's the data going? Who's going to use it? And there's a lot of resistance to that.
So then, okay, so I mean, Kenya is a start, and RC wants to see you continental. She wants to see this coffee on everybody's desk. How do you think digital can help there, and what kind of are your plans, both for procuring, maybe beyond Kenya, but also for selling and even going into retail?
So I think if I go back one step, I talk about Kenya's traceability. In Uganda, there's an incredible software that some of the large multinational players are using called MaxTrace, which allows you to trace coffees. They built that because their infrastructure hasn't existed. So there is technology out there. At present, we're proudly a Kenyan coffee company, and we're called Spring Valley Coffee. I live in Spring Valley. The roastery is still here. So we're really focused on showcasing today the best of what Kenya has to offer. Having said that, we have sampled incredible coffees from Uganda, Tanzania, Rwanda, Burundi, even the Congo, and we have partner roasteries in both Uganda and the Congo. So from a processing perspective, that's underway. That's a multi-year project. In terms of export, we actually do export to a few countries across the continent and more widely beyond. In the continent, the hardest thing is actually the costs of shipping coffee. I'll give you an example of an amazing customer. Arti trying to joke about DHL. We have a customer who spends more money on shipping the coffee than the value of the coffee, but she wants it every 2 weeks in Lagos, and it's just prohibitive. We've recently registered on a website called Africa. I don't know if people have come across it, which you can buy products from all over the continent and ship them. But again, the shipping costs, the duties, and frankly, the government bureaucracy is the biggest barrier for people like us that are in the finished goods product. The documentation and duty costs are often more than the value of the product.
And what about retail? So you've got some cafes in Kenya. Is that in your plans at some point? And what kind of keeps you up at night about that one?
Absolutely. So the intention is very much to kind of be a Pan-African business where people can experience great and incredible African coffees firsthand. Back to why I bought this business. The reason that I loved the coffee at Spring Valley before I bought it was everybody else was exporting the best stuff. And the previous owners were keeping the best stuff in the country. And I'm selfish. I want a great cup of coffee every morning. And I think many of us are very, very similar. So instead of sending it out, why don't we keep that value at home? So we're starting in Kenya. We're 5 cafes in, three years in, but very much with an intention for that number to be around the 15 mark in a couple of years. One is just intra-Africa trade. I mean, we actually find it's harder to trade within the continent or across the continent than it is for the US or the UK. For example, we got our US FDA approvals done remotely, virtually, to be able for us to export to the US during COVID. And to get somebody from local government to come in and actually kind of do the certifications without being corrupt, without asking for something. And then those marks, like the Kenya Bureau of Standards, the Uganda National Bureau of Standards, for those things to then be transferable across other parts of the continent, so we don't need to get recertified. I think recognizing other certifications, but also just streamlining the process. The number of licenses and kind of documentation required for us to do business both domestically, but also across the continent is absurd. And that's what drives costs up.
That's, yeah, and that's the kind of thing AFCFTA, I mean, it's still being negotiated and there's so many details. But do you think that has the potential to do that, to kind of, begin to look at problems like that across the continent?
I think it does if there are real teeth in terms of the conversations that are being had. It's one thing to give advice to a government, but these governments, I'll be very candid, most African governments, we probably have kind of people from government here, are not conducive to business. They're actually inhibited. They're actually a problem. If they just stayed out of our way, people could get on with it. And that is the reality of the situation. It might not be PC to say so, but I think it is the truth. And they're more, we in our industry and our sector does well in spite of the government, not because of its support.
Yeah, so I think that, and the idea is, if we could do this across the continent, if we could find, I mean, there are legitimate government interests in different areas, but how do we find the least distorting? I mean, that's kind of the language we use, least distorting way to kind of accomplish that government interest.